Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good night. Happy Tuesday, depending on where you are joining us from around the world. And welcome to day one of the Island Innovation Virtual Island Summit 2022. Thank you so much for joining us on the session. My name is Nisa Constantine Bobra. I am from the island of St. Lucia and welcoming you with all our warmth and hospitality. I am representing today Island Innovation as the Director of Creative Services. And I'm so excited for you to join us. Island Innovation is a global network and an avant-garde creative agency. We promote sustainable change, we encourage community worldwide, and we encourage you to visit us at islandinnovation.co to learn more about our work and our network and our services. I'm excited today about this conversation that we're about to engage in called Island Stories with the Caribbean Biodiversity Fund. I'm bringing to you two CEOs, past and present, of CBF as they celebrate the 10th anniversary, a marvelous milestone. So it's a great time to have them with us. But before we get into that, I just wanted to encourage you to use the chat system, to use our chat to introduce yourselves to each other. Let us know where you're visiting, where you're joining us from today, and share a little bit about yourself. As well, a poll should be showing up any minute now, which will give us a little more insight into where you're from, why you're here, and what you do, what industry you're representing today. So please take some time to fill out that poll. We really encourage that type of participation. It gives us an opportunity to know our network. As I mentioned, the chat will be used for Q&A. So please feel free to place as many questions in there as possible. And we will take our time to answer and get to as many of them as we are capable of within our time limits. Greetings from the Maldives. I see you. Welcome. Thank you for joining us. Again, the poll is on screen now, so take some time to fill it out and let us know your industry, your background. We're excited to have you to be part of our virtual summit this year. Hello from the Cayman Islands. I hope you are safe. We know that you were dealing with the passage of the hurricane. I hope everything is well. Thank you for joining us from Pakistan. Lovely. That's definitely a hello from Tuesday, right? That's a whole other time zone. Welcome everyone again to the Virtual Island Summit's first segment, conversation with the Caribbean Biodiversity Fund. So our poll shows that the largest number of participants are from Caribbean, lovely. We have 17% of you joining us from Europe and the Indian Ocean, 2% as far as the Indian Ocean. That's amazing. Thank you for coming from Asia. The largest number of persons here are from the tourism and innovation startup segments. We also have some people from the waste and circular economy. Lovely, thank you for joining us. And a small niche number in politics and government. We love that. Thank you for participating. So on to the meat of the matter. Allow me to introduce you to the moderator for our session. His name is Yabanex Batista. He is the deputy head of UNDP Global Fund for Coral Reef and the former CEO of CBF. Yaba, as he is affectionately known, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Nisa, for that kind introduction, and welcome to all of the participants that are here with us today from the Caribbean and from the rest of the world. As already mentioned by Nisa, this is actually quite a special session for me, and I'm sure for my colleague Karen, who has just come on screen as we celebrate together 10 years of the Caribbean Biodiversity Fund. First, before starting to talk a little bit about this amazing journey that the CBF has had during the last years, I would like to say a few words about Karen and her amazing and incredible experience. Karen has over 20 years of experience in Jamaica and the Caribbean in the environmental field, both in the public sector as well as international organizations field and civil society. She's a founding member of the Jamaican Institute of Environmental Professionals and has also served on the board of directors of the Natural History Society of Jamaica, the Champion College Alumni Association, and Jamaicans for Justice. A lot of her work has actually focused on community environmental management throughout the region, including as CEO of Jamaica's largest NGO grant-making institution, the Environmental Foundation of Jamaica. Prior to Karen becoming CEO of the Caribbean Biodiversity Fund, she was the CBF's Conservation Finance Program Manager, where she actually played a critical role in building and creating what the CBF and the region came to call the Caribbean Sustainable Finance Architecture. And later on, I will be asking more to Karen to tell us about her views on the Caribbean Sustainable Finance Architecture and the role she played and she continues to play. As I mentioned, welcome, Karen.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
As I said, as we were opening the session, for me, it's actually even emotional to be here with you today. I was the CEO of the CBF for a little bit over 7.5 years. And this journey of the organization has been amazing. But that journey actually didn't start with Karen and I. It started before. The CBF idea and concept was actually born around the year of 2006, 2007, as Caribbean countries in partnership with organizations like the Nature Conservancy, with the German Development Bank, the Global Environment Facility, UNDP, UNEP, the World Bank, and others, starting to forge the idea alongside with governments of the Caribbean Challenge Initiative. This was an initiative that was officially launched in 2013, but it was actually in 2008 when 5 countries of the Caribbean, including Bahamas, Jamaica, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, the Dominican Republic, and Grenada joined forces and announced the challenge of the Caribbean Challenge for the first time at the CBD COP in Germany. This was an inflection point for conservation and for sustainable financing in the Caribbean. And as we moved forward from that initiation of this challenge in 2008, all these institutions that I mentioned, but particularly the countries, really moved forward with putting together the major goals of the CCI, which included protecting at least 20% of the nearshore marine ecosystems of the islands that were joining the initiative, and very relevant to the CBF and the overall Caribbean Sustainable Finance Architecture. The second goal was building the sustainable finance mechanisms that would allow the countries to achieve the first goal of the CCI and to continue to build on those actions into the future. And it was then that the CBF, together with these other trust funds at the national level in the Caribbean, became truly the heart and the glue of that second goal of the CCI. Legally speaking, the CBF was actually, and I remember this date very clearly, the CBF was legally inscribed, we can say, on September 6, 2012. That was our legal birth. If we want to say it like that. So you can see it actually took some time for the CBF to gel and to actually come out of that initial cocoon to start doing its work. I personally joined the CBF, and I also remember this date on January 14, 2014. That was when I officially joined the CBF, although in my previous work with the Nature Conservancy, I also helped support part of the development of the CCI and the Caribbean Biodiversity Fund. And when I joined the CBF, I was literally by myself. It was a one-man show, so to speak, but I was also not alone. I actually would like to recognize that along this initial journey of the CBF, I had the great support of Jens Mackensen, who is the head of Environment and Agriculture for Latin America and the Caribbean of KFW, who was chair of the board when I joined. And I believe he just recently, in the last few days, stepped down from that role after an amazing journey as chair of the CBF. But I also had the amazing support in those initial years of Sheldon Cohen from the Nature Conservancy, former External Affairs Director of TNC, as well as Eleanor Phillips, current External Affairs Director of TNC, and Robert Weary, who was also part of the TNC team that helped create the CBF. And that initial effort of these 5 people was really critical in my view, to bring the CBF from being what I called at some points a paper fund to become a reality. In terms of some of the initial lessons learned, I would like to share with you what I believe has made CBF successful to date. First, as we all know, Rome was not built in one day, so it takes time. It takes a lot of time and effort to do this. We had great ambition, a great vision. And as we move forward in the CBF, we realized that we were confronting unexpected challenges, and our timeline and vision had to be readjusted constantly. But we persevered. And I think that for me is one of the key lessons learned. Second, the political commitment from countries through the CCI was essential for the CBF's success. Without that political commitment, partners like KFW, GEF, as I mentioned before, the Nature Conservancy, and many others that have joined the CBF today would not have come to the table, because those partners want to see that the countries also breathe this passion for the marine environment in the Caribbean. And they definitely got that signal from the countries when the CCI was officially launched also in 2013 in Necker Island. The second phase of the CCI was launched in Necker Island on that date. Third, during the first initial years, I think what I personally learned as the team grew, I think we learned that for a conservation trust fund to be successful, there are four key areas that need to move together in parallel. The first one, yes, we need to take care of all the legal requirements that are necessary to build a trust fund. We then need to also look at what are the funding sources that we need and secure those funding sources for the trust fund to be able to accomplish its work. But we cannot stop at those 2 points. We need to make sure that there are 2 additional elements that really bring life to an institution like the CBF. It needs to have a strategic direction with clear goals, clear objectives. And second, it has to have the right operational structure for it to be successful, even if it's nimble. And with that, I would like to maybe offer you the floor, Karen, to talk about what, in your view, has been your experience. But I would like to add one more date before you take the floor. I spent almost 3 years by myself in the CBF, but it was actually on December 16th, Karen, and I remember this very well, 2016, that we actually signed your first contract with the CBF to come and join us in developing this. And you started as initially as a consultant and then grew to your role of conservation finance manager. And now you are the CEO charting the course for this institution. Karen, over to you.
Thank you very much. And first, of course, as EbA said, the setting being here with EbA, having EbA being moderator, and as you've already heard, having all the history and background of CBF is amazing. So I'm very pleased to be here. Congratulations to Island Innovation and the team for your latest Virtual Island Summit. I'm glad to be involved, and we're honored to be on the opening day of this event. I think that what I would add to all that EbA has said is the continued evolution of the CBF is very real. As as he said, I started as technically not quite the second full-time employee, but certainly on staff for technical support since 2016. And the CBF continued to work to figure out what works, as I always use the phrase, for the Caribbean setting for where we are and where we are at the time. And I also recognize the now outgoing chair and vice chair of the CBF, Jens Mackinson and Eleanor Phillips, who are actually, unfortunately, not online, but they're with me here in Dominica, where I am for the next couple of days, because as we continue to grow and evolve, we have now signed our 7th pre-financing agreement with the newly minted Dominica National Conservation Trust. So one excitement to another, and we keep moving. But their support has been outstanding. And as was recognized, they are with the member organizations of the CBF, so they are with the donor groups. And it is interesting because our new chair, who is also online, I recognize Carolyn Trubetskoy, who is now chair of the Caribbean Biodiversity Fund, also chair of the St. Lucia National Conservation Trust Fund, because the National Conservation Trust Funds that we work with so closely make up the board of the CBF. And I think it's part of the amazing relationship and family that we are able to create as CBF. So I'm so glad that Carolyn is able to join us. And I also know that a number of the CBF staff and the other CBF family of architecture are online, so I'm happy to have them. But I think that it is and as EbA uses the phrase, inflection point, and a point to really think about where we will go going forward. Now that there are, a board, EbA and I started with a board of 2 and grow slowly from there. With each partnership agreement, our board grew, and we are now at a board of 12, and that will grow again. And so it's very honoring to be a part of that process. And we just concluded our board meeting last week, where we had a lot of discussion and way forward. And it was amazing to hear and listen to the involvement of the board members as to what will happen next with the CBF. So it's been an amazing ride. I think that the ideas of the Caribbean sustainable finance architecture are alive and well, and will continue to grow. The idea that the CBF is there as a regional partner and facilitator, and the National Conservation Trust Funds is there to help with on the ground national level facilitation is an amazing concept that we want to continue to work on. EbA would have said that we had 2 programs now. We have the Conservation Finance or Endowment Program, the Climate Change Program, which is focused on the EbA Facility. And we did last week sign our 3rd program, which is the Advancing Circular Economy Facility under what we've now called Nature-Based Economies Program. So we're up to 3 programs. In all that we do, our aim and our thought and our process is how can we help conservation to be long-term and sustainable in the Caribbean region. So we're excited by all of those opportunities and the ability to create space for ideas that are coming. I think a key part of the lessons learned that we've learned so far, that I have learned in all the various spaces, the importance of dialogue in setting up both the National Conservation Trust Funds that I was very involved at as part of, but also in the work that the CBF does. There's a real point of stopping and listening, as well as sharing and trying to figure out what works best. And we've had exceptional partners and donors who have really been open to the discussions. And to use EbA's phrase, we're building a plane and flying at the same time. And it's worked well. It's worked well because we've had people who have been able to appreciate our viewpoint, of course, for us to express ourselves, but also to hear and understand what's needed from that perspective has been very useful. So to those who are there listening in, I think that we thank you all for being a part of it. I think the journey continues. The vision for the CBF continues to be both about the environment and people, and that's something we try our best not to lose sight of. So I'll pause there, but very happy to be here and so happy that EbA is on this discussion with me.
Thank you, Karen. Actually, there are a couple of things that you mentioned that take me back in time, but also make me think about where the CBF is today. And you talked about that vision of the CBF, which is critical. It's the vision and the mission of the CBF in terms of bringing sustainable funding for conservation and sustainable development in the Caribbean has been the North Star of the institution since its beginning. And I recall that when the CBF was born, the institution was born mainly with one financial mechanism only in place, and that was the endowment fund that you referenced, which is the anchor of the conservation finance program. And quickly, the institution realized and evolved even more quickly to add on more financial mechanisms. So here first, congratulations on the new facility focus on the circular economy and that new program on nature-based economies. I think this is wonderful, and it's absolutely on the right direction. We need to bring closer the dialogue between nature and economies in our region, because we all know that in the Caribbean, our economies are highly dependent on nature. But what I wanted to maybe get from you now is how do you see this vision of the CBF evolving today? The CBF has grown from having one program to 3 programs with 3 financial instruments. What else is growing now and coming out of the CBF today?
You know, we're all, both you, I, and others are always thinking about ideas and ways to go forward. So I think there are a number of concepts. The one is that we've been very careful to have facilities which are going to be responsible for particular pockets of funding, but that we have bigger programs and wider programs and ideas. So for the conservation finance program, we've already gotten as well funding since the last time most of you would have heard from me, from the French government, for the CRAB project, which is the Caribbean Regional Architecture for Biodiversity project. And that's focused on building the architecture and providing the support to the programs and the funds that we already have, because the design of the architecture is ever evolving and therefore ever growing. And what we want to make sure is to provide the information, the knowledge sharing that makes sure that the trust funds and other partners can really think about ideas for sustainable finance mechanisms. So we're excited about that program. The other is to think about other types of accounts that we can have in our endowment process. We are particularly excited with a discussion that we're having with 2 regional partners on creating opportunities for not national conservation trust funds in our sense, but other types of operating mechanisms for regional ideas. One with the Caribbean Biological Corridor, and the other with the Caribbean, what will we hope become the Caribbean Invasive Alien Species Trust Fund. Because the idea is our specialty in having an endowment and the process of pooling resources to an endowment are of benefit to the region overall. And of course, in the areas that I've mentioned, which still focus on biodiversity and Caribbean biodiversity. So there are a lot of ideas still milling around. The trust funds, of course, also have been working on their own ideas. You will recall that the idea behind the endowment and the architecture is that the trust funds are challenged to match with the funding received from the CBF, their own funding, and they've been doing a wonderful job. We're at 100% matching for the funds that have had to meet it. And with really innovative ideas from some of the programs, I saw Craig Henry on the line. St. Lucia National Conservation Trust Fund has a number of programs that they've been working on, a really innovative one for biodiversity offsets with a group called Voyage, which CBF has also been a part of. So there really has been nice innovation in the ways forward. So I tell you some of the vision, but there's still more. And of course, each time we have some of the conversations with partners, such as the ones on the line, I think more come up. But we are excited to begin the process. The circular economy, just to really step in, we're so excited that it's all new for us in terms of doing the work, but we know that the importance of thinking and talking circular economy and circular production is something that's the only thing that makes sense for islands, not even just Caribbean islands, for islands in general. And we look forward to hearing and creating some opportunities for innovation in those areas.
Great, Karen. Thank you so much. I want to throw in one more idea for you for the future of the CBF, and that comes from my current experience in the Global Fund for Coral Reefs. We are a blended finance mechanism that is aiming at bringing together the power of grant funding and investment from the private sector to really go further in terms of the impact for conservation around the world, in our case, specifically with coral reefs. And I think the CBF as a conservation trust fund, very well established now, could have an opportunity to dive into this topic in the future. And I think through some of the projects that you mentioned before, there might be an opportunity. I just want to throw that in for you, and also offer, as always, my help to bounce off ideas around blended financing and how CBF could work on this, and for you to learn from the GFCR experience. So I hope that offline we can have that conversation. There are a couple of questions that I just would like to highlight. I think there was one that was asking, and we only have a few minutes left, so I'll just pick one or two. One participant is asking us about the CBF's experience on South-South cooperation. So I think here it would be interesting for you to tackle that one, how you have promoted exchange among different Caribbean islands. And there's another question about the CBF work on agriculture and the potential for CBF funding related to agriculture as it relates to the marine environment. And so I think we only have time to pick those two questions from the audience today. So over to you, Karen.
Sure. Thank you all so much for the questions, and we will make sure to answer the others for the records with Island Innovation. I'm sure they'll figure out how to get them to everybody. But in terms of the questions you asked on agriculture, we do have a number of ways of interventions for agriculture and agricultural programs. Of course, under the National Conservation Trust Funds, what they do is they have their own call for proposals and grant making processes. I didn't emphasize today, but I have before, the independence and autonomy of those organizations. And so they're doing their own calls for proposals in the various islands where we work. And the other I would mention really quickly is the ecosystem-based adaptation facility under our climate change program, which does direct grant making to regional, large regional and national level organizations in areas focused on restoration and recovery of ecosystems. And we have a lot more on the website. I know that our comms officer, Renee Smith, is also on and repeatedly showing our website. So please do check out the opportunities and the options that are there. But the EbA facility has now gone through 3 calls for proposals, and we'll have one more in the near future, and has really thought about ideas that create agricultural opportunities with the concept of ecosystem restoration and, of course, climate resilience. So I think we're close on time, so I will pause there and see if you, on the South-South cooperation, we're very involved. You know, one of the things we hope that we are able to do is help carry the Caribbean voice to a number of the various fora that happen globally. We were able to do that very well in my months are mixing up, June, in Lisbon at the Oceans Conference. I think as well, we make sure to keep cooperation with other partners, both at the Caribbean level. The Caribbean Climate Smart Accelerator comes to mind. And we're also in some very interesting discussion with a number of private sector regional players. But also globally, the Global Island Partnership is a very strong facility that really talks islands between the various countries. And I think more and more my question is where there are similarities. I don't know how many of you know, and Yaba knows the story much better than I do, that we are actually designed from the Micronesia Challenge. And those of you who have not read up on the Micronesia Challenge, that is also an interesting story of really trying to create an opportunity for the islands. And they have, of course, grown as well in how they've designed their project and what they're able to do. So we are also very conscious of the role we play as representatives and ambassadors for islands, but also Caribbean islands.
Thank you, Karen. Actually, we've been informed by Island Innovation that we do have a few more minutes. So actually, there is another question, which I think it's very interesting. It's related to the role of education and professional development in the CBF. So what has the CBF done in terms of engaging, let's say, with the youth and other communities that can help us continue to raise awareness for the proper use of our natural resources in the Caribbean? Tell us more about education and the CBF, Karen.
So that's the nice thing about the architecture and the design that we have for the sustainable finance architecture, because our beneficiaries on the ground throughout the region are already the champions and the experts. We were in Bahamas, for example, for our annual meeting, and we visited with a group of mangrove keepers. Water keepers is their name. That is, they already are doing amazing work on mangrove restoration, and in particular in Hurricane Dorian relief. But the quick answer is that a lot of that is through those partners on the ground. Our financing, our role as funds, as trust funds, helps to facilitate the continued work and championing of ideas that a number of our EbA grantees and our NCTF and NCTF partners already are doing on the ground. So we work through those major organizations on the youth component. We will also, in particular for our role as Conservation Trust Fund managers, also have training opportunities. A number of them are already through groups like Island Innovation to share what we've learned and best practices, in particular for us on conservation trust funds. And we also work on trying to make sure that the message of those international commitments from both CBF and some of the partners are shared so that everybody has a sense of the results that are being achieved. So there are a number of ways we participate with partners who are already doing great work on the ground with youth and other partners. And we look forward to thinking through more with those who are in the call today and others who may have ideas.
Thank you, Karen. We have another good question here. You've covered part of the question already, but I think it would be interesting for the audience to hear about how CBF has engaged with the tourism sector as an ally for sustainable use of marine resources in the Caribbean. And before you answer, for those that have additional questions that maybe we don't have a chance to get to, please do write to communications@caribbeanbiodiversityfund.org, and the CBF team will get back to you with any additional questions you may have. But Karen, over to you on tourism and nature and the Caribbean Biodiversity Fund.
Thanks, EbA. Of course, anything that's happening in the Caribbean that is involving discussions of private sector have a huge idea and concept of tourism and a tourism focus. And we have had a number of interactions with the tourism sector. There is, of course, a whole discussion of sustainable tourism and how sustainable tourism is used. Our chairman, our new chair, is very involved in that process, and we're very pleased to have her insight on what's useful for that sector. We were having, it's so funny, in Bahamas, again, we really had with the fund manager there, a discussion of how close we were with so many major, nice discussions on tourism and tourism involvement in the CBF before COVID. And how much COVID would have interrupted what was possible through some of the trust funds, in particular where they are matching contributions. So I know the Tourism Enhancement Funds in some of the countries have been approached and are working. In particular, I mentioned St. Lucia on ideas of making sure they're involved. We have this exciting discussion for biodiversity offsets, where there's through Voyage.com, information on how you can offset the cost of your carbon footprint by contributions, calculating it through the carbon calculator, and then being able to make payments to projects that our National Conservation Trust Funds, among other partners, are working on the ground in the various countries. So that's also been very exciting. We are continuing to make those approaches. I have had dialogue with many of the Caribbean hotel and tourist associations, trying to find the best role for us at a regional level, but certainly in the various countries at the national level, we have been able to make insights and inroads into how we can play a role. And I know, for example, discussions with cruise ships had and I will continue to take place. And this new drive for regenerative tourism, for circular economy discussions, will push us towards making sure that the tourism sector is involved in one way or another in the way that we move forward as Caribbean biodiversity champions.
Thank you, Karen. And one last question to you from me. 10 years from now, where do you see the CBF? You've gone through an institutional renewal process in terms of staff, in terms of the growth of your board, changes in your board as of last week. Change and renewal is always good and brings new ideas, new blood.
Mm-hmm.
Where do you see the CBF 10 years from today? What's your dream?
Oh, wow. You know, when I used to do visioning sessions myself, it would be, what headline do you see for CBF in 10 years? And I think a lot has to do with remaining current with our voice and innovation on what's possible for financing in the Caribbean. So I think the Renee, our comms specialist, has been using the term thought leader and change agent, because we want to make sure that we're hearing, listening, and trying to be responsive as to what makes sense for conservation financing and making changes. I think that the architecture should and can only grow from strength to strength, and therefore there'll be more work and projects, and I will be able to tell you all about what each of those trust funds and other trust funds in the region are doing, because I think it's very important that we build and continue to grow, and that we can talk about the successes and have written and clearly articulate the role and the value of the CBF in the process in Caribbean development, and that those who are here who had never heard CBF before will be a lot less. That percentage will be so much less in 10 years' time. So I think those are the key ones, that we are able to remain nimble and agile and address and think through carefully the role that we can play in those sectors.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Karen. Karen, thanks to you, thanks to the board, thanks to all the staff. I think now, I mean, as of now, I don't know personally all the CBF staff, which I think it's great news. It means that you have continued to grow and evolve as we were just talking about. So again, thanks to you for keeping this dream going with the rest of the team. Thanks for continuing to raise the conservation finance flag for the Caribbean, which is absolutely essential for our future economic and sustainable development. Continue, you, Karen, but with the rest of the team, to be that thought leader in this space for the Caribbean. And I think most importantly, I think you alluded to this as well, continue building that dialogue with the different sectors, because it is through dialogue and through partnerships that we actually achieve success. Proud to have been part of the history of the CBF, and I do hope that in the future I can continue to support you and the institution in your future endeavors. With that, I would like to thank you, Karen,
Thank you.
for the amazing work that the CBF has continued to do. And I turn over back to Nessa for some messages from Island Innovation. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Karen, EbA, thank you so much. This was very illuminating. We always wondered just how is the CBF making that link between environment and people, and you've illustrated it beautifully. We want to take this opportunity to wish you a happy 10th anniversary, and we're definitely looking forward to 10 more years and more with CBF. Thanks again. I'd like to take this opportunity to invite everyone to our next session. We continue our conversation with islanders, and we will be speaking with Rachel Lolia, a founder of Tipo Pei, out of Guadeloupe. Rachel and her company, Tipo Pays, are focused on specializing in baby food made from local ingredients. Definitely something not to be missed. The next session starts at 2:30 p.m. New York time, 7:30 p.m. London time, and 4:30 a.m. Sydney, Australia time. Of course, that is tomorrow. So please tune in the next couple of minutes. It's not going to be an hour or so. We look forward to you joining us. Finally, I just want to say, please follow us on Instagram at _Island Innovation. Again, we're on Instagram at _Island Innovation. Thank you all for joining us. It was a great session. We look forward to your continued participation for the rest of the week.